Can a Christian actually do a tattoo? Can we tattoo ourselves? The Bible says any part which cannot do like that. I think this few related questions, so we could group them up and we can answer them together. Can Christians wear bikini? Yo. Does it matter what the text on our clothing says? Okay. Does it matter? Okay, so the clothes which you wear, does it matter whether what it says on it? Body piercings, right or wrong? I read that some pastors purposely do piercing to share with gangsters, etc., so that they are not looking like outsiders. Isn't that wrong?
When it comes to now, these questions are grouped together because it cares a lot about how I physically look like. So why do you feel the need to pierce, tattoo, and wear bikini?
Well, not bikini. I mean, piercing look cool. You want to be with the crowd, maybe?
But why should why should Christians be so conscious of how they look like and you look cool, you're trying to impress who? Who are you actually trying to impress?
The girl sitting in the corner? Literally.
That corner. But then if a girl is easily impressed by tattoos and body piercing, then there's also an issue with how you guys will get into a relationship. Tattoo is permanent scarring of the body. Piercing puts a hole in your body. So why to do that all that just to get a girl's attention is not wise. Why would you want to do that? If you talk about right and wrong, then you can always argue with me, right? I know pastors who tattoo. I know pastors who pierce. So when you go into right and wrong, how can we say right and wrong when we have so-called preachers and pastors doing these kind of things?
I think when we become Christians, right, the Bible is clear, right? We are called to be set aside. We are not called to conform to the world standards. So when we start piercing and we start tattooing, are we actually conforming to the world standard? Because if we find ourselves wanting to conform to the world standard, then are we really setting ourselves apart? Is there a distinct difference between our lifestyles and that of our peers? Are we really the salt of the world? Right? Because Christ says, what use is the salt if it loses its saltiness? So if we find ourselves wanting to look like our friends, having 3, 4, 5 big hole earring here, you can put your finger and play it, right? And then we have tattoo around. I mean, I'm not saying, the Bible doesn't say yes or no, right? But I'm just saying that how are you glorifying God through this? Can you answer that?
Also bear in mind that when we go into society, the society norms is such that if you have a tattoo and a body piercing, the way they look at you is different really. So they perceive you to be of another type. So the gangster type, the useless fella type. So that may or may not be wrong, but this is perception. So for example, if you bring a girl or bring a guy and they have very spiky hair, 1-2 feet long, and very brightly colored and so on. I mean, there is perception. If the person says that I'm actually a pastor in the church, it's still very weird. Even though the person may be a good person inside, but this perception, you create problems already from the start. So as a Christian, right, do you actually want to be in a situation where people say, hey, that fella is a Christian but he put tattoos on? And at the end of the day, right, why do you actually want to put a tattoo? I mean, even if you say, I love Jesus, you tattoo, I love Jesus, there are better ways of showing your love for Christ than tattooing your body.
Perhaps I could turn you guys to a passage, 1 Corinthians chapter 8. I'll read for us from verses 8 to 13. Food will not condemn us to God. We are not worse off if we do not eat, and no better off if we do. But take care that this right of yours does not somehow become a stumbling block to the weak. For if anyone sees you who have knowledge eating in an idol's temple, will he not be encouraged? If his conscience is weak to eat food offered to idols, and so by your knowledge this weak person is destroyed, the brother for whom Christ died, thus sinning against your brother and wounding their conscience, when it is weak, you sin against Christ. Therefore, if food makes my brother stumble, I will never eat meat, lest I make my brother stumble. Of course, this is not just talking about eating pork. So, I mean, the context is food, but you can apply it to other areas of life, right? So if you see it as your right to pierce, you see it as your right to tattoo, right? Think about what your actions would do to the person next door, right? Because Christ's greatest commandment, he gave two, right? To love your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. And then love your neighbor as yourself. Your neighbor is not just the person who lives next door, but is everyone you interact with. So, when you do these things, what is your message to them as a Christian? Right? So, if you can answer that, then I guess you have your answer. But I think that basically answers tattoos and bikinis. But then maybe some of you said, I want to associate myself, I want to minister to the gangsters. Gangsters always got fancy tattoos, big earrings, so I want to associate myself with them. So is it right then? Again, Christ called us to be set apart, right? Now, let's just entertain this thought. We want to associate ourselves with them. So where do you draw the line? Why just gangsters? Maybe someone comes up with an idea, I want to minister to drug addicts as well. Can you then take drugs? How about prostitution? Will we willingly go into prostitution because we want to minister to prostitutes? No, right? Because, right. So what's the difference between us and the people we are ministering to? So what's the difference between the people we are ministering to and us? Because when we go to tell them the good news, right? And we're going to tell them, right? If you guys can remember, what was the camp theme was? Yeah. It says, do not be conformed to the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, right? So if you find yourself conforming to the world to reach out to these people, are you really transforming in your mind? Can people actually see that Christians are different from this world? Are they really transformed by the renewing of their minds? Yeah? So, yeah.
Any questions or not? How about culture? Well, so okay, you have the Evans, for example, who say that the tattoo for culture. But if you think about it, right, that culture is actually a lost culture. Right? For example, if you really want to be an Iban, right, they tattoo because they believe that it has spiritual powers. So again, when you go into spiritual powers really, then you cannot do it because you're Christian. If you tattoo for cosmetic already, isn't it? Then it goes back to the original question already.
Most tattooing, when people say it's culture, has something to do with the spirit world. It's believed to give them extra strength or something like that. So if you say you're a Christian and you still tattoo for the culture, then are you still promoting the meaning behind that culture?
Any other questions?
In the issue of culture too, when we look at the Christians in Egypt, they actually have tattoos on their wrist, cross tattoos on their wrist. It is a sign of a symbol that they are actually Christians in a country which is not majority Christian. So can we actually condemn the practice of tattoos when it has been a ritual practice by Christians in Egypt for such a long time?
Answer no, we cannot condemn. In that case, again, we talk about eating meat and not eating meat.
what Paul was saying. So in this case, it has been part of the culture itself. I'm not completely sure what part of the culture it is. But if it's a genuine, sincere act of faith, something like the way we would put guys perhaps wearing crosses, perhaps some people would say that's weird, but if it's part of the culture, that's fine. But the question over here asks, I doubt it's from a religious. Talking about tattooing, I doubt that Christians consider it as an act of faith. Most times, Christians, when they are, I'm deliberately narrowing the question here. The question here is more towards tattooing because I want to tattoo. In that sense, I would say the answer is no. But of course, you let the question.
Also, just to bring up that point again, because you said it's a Muslim majority, right? So having such a visible sign actually puts someone in danger. So that is
Also, a testament to faith that he is a Christian.
yeah, but you see, the thing is, we're not condemning anything here. We're just giving you things to think about, and yeah, because these gray areas, right? So we are asking questions here. How is God glorified? How does it impact your evangelism? Right? What happens there is in a cultural sense. Can you actually bring and mimic